Morning. Like you said, I am a friend of Craig's. I actually lived with him when we were at Lincoln Christian, when he was an undergrad there. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers here. I was told by Craig to make my sermon about half an hour, and I actually had to lengthen a little bit. So if I go overly long, blame him, not me. But our text today, if it's up there, is from 1 John, and I just want to speak on love. But let me read it aloud. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. If any one of you has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in you? Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but in actions and in truth. In this morning's text, John raises a question by offering an answer to it. The question is, what is love? At first, it might seem like an almost painfully unnecessary question to ask. After all, we all know what love is. But as with most of life's simple and seemingly fundamental aspects, a little thoughtful reflection reveals the issue to be a little bit more complex than we first think. St. Augustine, when asked to explain the concept of time, famously responded, "I believe I know what time is until somebody asks me to explain it." And I think that most of us have the same relationship with our understanding of love. Most of us in the church likely believe that we understand what love is, but would struggle if we are asked to give a succinct explanation of what love actually is. Thankfully, John has done it for us, and I'd like to spend some time with you today unpacking the meaning and the interpretation, or the implications of what he said. If we want evidence of the difficulty of this concept, of what John has indirectly set before us in our text, then we need only look to contemporary culture. It has 1,000,001 definitions for love, and all of them are true, and yet not one of them is true. Bear with me, if you will, as I'll explain what I mean by that. When it comes to the question of what love is, our culture has realized two things. The first is that it has no idea which one of the countless definitions of love that exist is actually correct. It has realized that the word love is, for all intents and purposes, meaningless in the universal collective sense. That is, there's no one definition of love that we all agree on. The second realization that our culture has come to is that this is a really big problem. After all, almost everyone would give lip service to the idea that love is one of the most important concepts in the world. We all, each and every one of us, wither without love, and we all know it. So finding itself in this predicament, the world around us has decided that it will define all of our definitions of love as true. The meaning of love, it is now claimed, is decided by those who are loving and being loved. Love is now, quite literally, what you make of it. But as Christians, we know that while our culture claims that all of its definitions are true, in reality there's one true highest definition for love. And we know that this highest meaning of love is something given to us and not derived by us. It is not, thanks be to God, up to us to define love. Love has been defined and put on display in all of its glory and splendor by the one who revealed himself to be the way, the truth, and the life. John's words in our text this morning confirm this. They cut straight through our culture's confusion. Let's listen to the words again. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. If any one of you has material possession and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in you? Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but in actions and in truth. Let your mind rest for a second on the poignant truth that we all begin from the same place, Christians and non-Christians alike. I can't go too far down this path. This is probably another sermon. But the realization that we all have the same beginnings, that we all begin with the same questions, has incredibly important implications. The reason I want to point this out is to draw attention to what this means for the way that we think about, behave toward, and treat those outside the church. In our questions, there is no us in them. There's only us. Not one of us has a different set of questions that are essential for life. We all, to use our current example, long to know what love actually is. And not one of us begins from some privileged place of understanding or insight. It is our answers that divide us. Yet, as a side note, it is love that ultimately heals even this divide. But that's yet another sermon, and I'm pretty sure you signed up for one. It's precisely here, though, that a gem of truth awaits our discovery, one whose natural brilliance is so often dulled by the ever-present grime of self-righteousness in our lives. Our common questions arise naturally out of the being that God has given to all those he's created, but our answers do not. They are gifts from God that we can do nothing of ourselves to bring about. We can, and should, do nothing but receive them with humble gratitude. I'll leave the line of thought here, but I encourage you to set aside just a bit of time this week to think about how this truth, that our answers are what separate us, and that the church's true answers are gifts from God, affects the way that we should think about, value, and treat those outside the church, those who are searching for answers that we were given as unmerited gifts. Returning to our text this morning, let's turn to the question itself, turn from the question itself to the answer John has given us. He wastes no time, opening with a bold declaration. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. This is love. This is the answer that the world has fumbled about for in the dark and failed to find. And this is the light that has burst into the inner chamber of our heart and set them ablaze. A lifetime of praise would not be enough to pay off even the interest on the debt we owe to God here. In his provision of a divine example, a living, breathing definition of love, in order that we may live by this light and have no need to fruitlessly plumb the depths of darkness that confront us apart from the light of Holy Scriptures. The definition of love we are given, John tells us, is the sacrificial life and death of the Son of God. John is not saying anything new here. He is merely repeating and reminding his readers of the words he heard his Lord speak while still with the disciples. Greater love has no one than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. John wastes no time getting to his next point. He follows the answer to the question of love with a call to respond to our understanding properly. And we ought to lay down our lives for one another. It is not enough for John, or more importantly for Christ, that we simply understand what love is and marvel at it. We must do it. We must replicate this in our own lives. We must actively love others, literally and concretely act in such a way that shows others to be more important. There is no room in love for those who claim to love others, but whose lives do not contain any consistent evidence of an understanding that love is a verb, that love is an action and not merely a pretty idea that gets us worked up on Sundays, but disappears with the arrival of the suffering that surrounds us Monday to Saturday. John knows that we cannot make excuses for not loving in this way either, as God promises the Holy Spirit's help to those who genuinely pursue love, and God always honors his promises. The call to love others is a call to breathe the word of truth into this world, and we've been promised that as we do, the Spirit of God breathes with us. If our lives are not characterized by his love, it is our failure and not his. Remember what God has to say about lukewarm lovers. God does the same thing with those that we do with our coffee after the Sunday funnies or the crossword distracts us from it for a while. In Revelation, he tells us he spits those who are lukewarm out of his mouth. Coincidentally, John wrote Revelation as well, and we should be sensing a unified message there. John, the beloved disciple, understands this concept on a profoundly deep level, and how could he not, given the time that he spent at Jesus' feet? Listen to the words he himself heard Jesus speak, recorded in the 15th chapter of the gospel that John also authored. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. My command to you is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love is no one than this, to lay one's life down for one's friends.